Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. This is episode 506 on the march to 1,000. This running gag's going to be going on for a long time. It's like 2 episodes old. Joining me on this show here is Aryeh Cohen Wade. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Great to have you back on the show here. Where can people find your show, Culturally Determined?
My show is both a video and audio podcast. So the video, you can find it either on bloggingheads.tv or YouTube, or you can subscribe to it, anywhere you regularly get your podcasts, and you just search for Culturally Determined.
There you go. Who'd you have on recently?
I taped one that is going to go up hopefully on Monday with Phoebe Maltzbovy, who recently started a new job at a new website called The Signal. And we basically talked for an hour plus about all the different ways Twitter is bad.
Okay. All right.
Look for that one. And then recently, I guess I did a couple on the storming of the Capitol. One with Daniel Bessner, who is a historian and contributor to Jacobin, and one with Bill Black, who is also a historian, and he is an editor of a magazine called Contingent, I believe.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about why Twitter is bad here today. So feel free to dust off some of those takes when we get into Gina Carano here a little bit later on in the show. But the first part of the show is centered around impeachment, but in specific, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today is I saw you kind of fire off a tweet, as we are wont to do, and this tweet basically said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I can, characterize this accurately, that we shouldn't refer to the storming of the Capitol, the insurrection, as 1/6. And it seems like you've got a fairly strong position as to why. So could you? Yeah, you've got hot takes. I'm here for them.
Yeah, and I can't remember when I tweeted this. I think a couple weeks ago. I mean, people, I guess, fairly quickly started calling it 1/6. Of course, the parallel is to 9/11, and in some ways, the event itself and its like strangeness and unprecedented nature does have some parallels to 9/11. But those are very very different events, and 3,000 people were killed on 9/11 in spectacular and horrific fashion, and it was sort of like something that never happened before, and we had no idea what was happening, and there was no sort of term that we could come up with, like the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in the Pentagon. That's a mouthful and doesn't.
It's like a combination of Benghazi and Oklahoma City, where you have like people storming the embassy, Benghazi style, but it's like domestic terrorist, that kind of flavor. Yeah, you don't want to call it Trump Ghazi. That feels gimmicky.
Right, and so we still haven't decided whether we should call this a riot, an insurrection, an uprising, a coup. That's still to be all kind of sorted out, I guess.
McConnell called it a terrorist attack, so I'm coming around to calling it that.
Well, but what is the storming of the Capitol is, I think, the best phrase that's gained traction so far. But sort of like just calling it 1/6, I think removes. I don't know. It both makes it iconic, and I mean, obviously, it is iconic, and because it's something that has no direct parallel in American history, aside from maybe like the sacking of Washington during the War of 1812. But also, yeah, it just it seems to just slot it into like a category where we're all just the parallel to 9/11 makes it seem like everyone in America was against 9/11. There's a large percentage of people who are sort of ambivalent or somewhat approving of what the people who stormed the Capitol did.
Well, what's that American Enterprise Institute study this week say? 4 out of 10 Republicans are okay with it, or are okay with political violence on some level?
Yeah, so there's people. I mean, the way the right has reacted to it, there were people who most people in power like immediately denounced it, and then some people claim that it was a false flag or it was really Antifa, or something like that. Or and then there's people saying, well, this wasn't really a big deal. These were kind of like morons and jokers and confused people. And I have a lot of sympathy for that view because a lot of the people who ended up in the Capitol did seem to be very confused and very misled by false conspiracy theories like QAnon. But anyway, I like it just the shorthanding it when it was something that happened 5 weeks ago, and I don't know, it just seems to. I guess I haven't fully like thought this out, but it seems to like historicize it, make it just like make it sort of like 9/11 when really it's different in a bunch of ways, and 5 people died instead of 3,000. No buildings were destroyed, thankfully. Um, nothing has to be dramatically rebuilt. Hopefully, there will be no sort of new domestic terrorism laws or draconian measures put in place out of fear or a hurried reaction. So yeah, I don't think I think it's a unique sui generis event that it's going to take a long time to understand why it happened, how it was, like how who let it happen. Was it mostly uh, people screwing up and people who are incompetent, or was there an aspect of malevolence where people sort of allowed it to happen, or maybe thought they could take advantage of something? So there's a lot still to know, and I think there should be congressional investigations and probably something somewhat like the 9/11 Commission report, like something like that, of if there's still people who like both sides can agree are sort of impartial good people with that, you can find like 12 of them to serve on a board or something. I don't know if that is still possible.
Well, isn't calling for a 9/11 Commission style report sort of saying that this is more like 9/11 than it maybe appears on first blush?
Well, I think getting to the bottom of it and having there's like, so one difference with 9/11 is there wasn't really a criminal investigation and people like arrested and put in jail because of the direct links to 9/11. People went to Guantanamo and then they never really, like, they're still there mostly, I assume, or some people were eventually released, and a lot of people were
maybe, yeah,
a lot of people were
yeah.
arrested who should have been arrested. But anyway, so we never. Whereas here, there's all these people who were very quickly tracked down and arrested, and they're going to be charged with trespassing or damaging a national monument or whatever. And so that sort of criminal process will uncover various facts. But I think pulling back and trying to figure out, I mean, I think what the main questions are: was there anyone involved in the government who knew this was going to happen and either encouraged it or decided to step aside, sort of, or deny sending the National Guard in so that the rioters or insurrectionists could get in? So we need to find that out. And there's this guy who I was making fun of on Twitter for a while before he blocked me, and then it turned out he got kicked off because he was involved with Stop the Steal. This guy Ali Alexander, and he claimed that there are 3 Republican congressmen who were working with him directly on the Stop the Steal movement. And if that's the case, that seems like something we should know for sure. And this guy is like a literal con artist and a liar, so we shouldn't trust him really anything he says. But that sort of thing needs to be investigated. And yeah, but anyway, I think just calling it 1/6 to get back to the original question sort of just denies what happened. And I think the reason we settled on 9/11 was because of the overwhelming, like, unprecedented, shocking, tragic, hard to understand horribleness of that day. And you couldn't just say the attack on World Trade Center because there was the Pentagon and there was the 4th plane that crashed in Pennsylvania and so forth. So we somehow decided 9/11. If you go back, actually, at some point I was reading, like the New York Times or other sort of sources from like the couple days after 9/11, and I think they all called it like last Tuesday's events or the attacks from last Tuesday. Like even right then, people were like, we don't know, we don't know how to refer to this. We don't have an easy name for it. And then it became 9/11. And I mean, I don't know if people ever called like the attack on Pearl Harbor 12-4 or what,
12,
12-7?
12-7, 12-7.
Maybe they did back, back in the 40s. I don't know. And then
I
this
don't.
became known as Pearl Harbor Day. And
Yeah, I mean, like
they
they
call it
made
World
it. They
Trade Center
made it
Day.
a holiday. It's not like that part's unprecedented, I suppose. Give me 1 second. I want to turn off the heat real quick.
Sure.
Raw podcast people. This is what happens when I forget to turn off
Well,
the heater.
it'll be interesting to see 11 months from now, there will be some sort of commemoration for the first anniversary.
I mean, there will have to be. Like, I mean, I think.
And is former President Trump going to be invited? Probably not. Like, what are
Certainly
they going to
not.
say? And so that sort of, the historical memory making and sort of like myth making of the day will like happen as time goes on. And, there's going to be some sort of memorial or monument to the like officers who died, etc. And
That's the other reason why. I mean, like, I think for the Democrats, and we're seeing this, we're taping this right after they got done impeaching and then immediately recessed so they could go on vacation and do district work next week here.
and it's Valentine's Day. We have to remember.
And it's, as Chris Coons noted romantic, reminds us that it's Valentine's Day. So he's got to get home to his family.
Is he from Delaware?
He's another one of those Delaware types.
Okay,
Yep.
so he's close to Virginia. We know Virginia's for lovers. He's
Yeah.
not quite there, but he's
No, but to
Delaware
your point
borders.
too. Well, how long is that commute? Like maybe at maximum 2 hours.
Right, he just hop on the Amtrak as
Yeah.
Joe Biden did. That was, I assume that was not something he actually felt and just a stupid thing he said because he didn't want to deal with this whole thing anymore or whatever. But yeah, I think that people are going to be.
I know, but I think that's the thing other people felt. No, I do think you'll hear about that for a while. I think, at least for me, the reason I settled in on 1-6 early on, because I thought about my thinking on this, and the reason I was using that is because it was easier than me having to debate whether it was a terror attack or whether it was a storming of the Capitol or whether it was a riot. Like, it was a way of bringing up that day without having to start off in a definitional debate as the discussion point. Like, because I do kind of feel at the core of this is a domestic terror attack, in part because they wanted to explicitly disrupt a constitutional process, and they were doing what they were doing under the errant belief that somehow, some way, they could stop the steal. The steal of the election. So the goal was a political action.
Yeah.
They wanted, and in that sense, it's like definitionally terrorism. The next layer of that, though, to me, is kind of like the bioterrorism thing, that behaving in a way that knowingly spreads COVID, it is like what they were doing. They knew would further distribute out the pandemic and the disease.
Well, I don't know if probably most people who are in that crowd are not super thinking about that particular aspect of it. Maybe they think COVID doesn't exist, or most of that. It's a joke multiple people made was like, if there ever was a time when you would think someone would like put on a mask, like they had a good reason to put on a mask, let alone like storming into the Capitol. But that even like they don't even believe
the next
COVID
part
so
is
much
the
that
death wish thing. You or I storm into the Capitol. There have been several things I've commented to people about, like the videos from that day that just like really do stick out to me as terrorism. I have never, sober or otherwise, ever been in the mindset that I could kneel a cop down and gouge out his eyes with my thumbs. Like, or the other video of like the group of people just pushing the cop around for fun. I've never thought I had that much impunity and that much invulnerability, and like that again, going back to mens rea, state of mind stuff. I mean, that's much closer to the death wish sort of mentality, whether or not you even realize that you have a death wish. Once you're shoving cops around and thinking that you can kill a cop with your bare hands, you're out of your mind, but you're also well into death wish territory at that point.
Yeah, I mean it's all very strange, and so it is hard to pin down. It had the whole thing was surreal and had this grotesque aspect to it with the costumes and the guy with the face paint and the horns, and so it had this very performative aspect to it that seemed like you would have to be mentally off in order to do this sort of stuff. And then yeah, there's sort of
And
like
it worked
the
in layers too. Like you have like kind of the wacky component of it, like the QAnon shaman who's a vegan. And he's kind of like a punchline now because his mommy beseeches so that he can get organic food, and then because of white privilege, he actually gets it. Like. So gross. But that serves as one layer that sanitizes the other layer of like guy who lays pipe bombs at the DNC and the RNC. Guy who actually like uses his bare hands and gouges a man's eyeball out. That cop's gonna lose his eye. Or like he's
yeah, I
actually
mean,
yeah.
a pipe bomb, everyone can agree that is, terrorism, especially when you're leaving it at the RNC and DNC headquarters. And as far as I know, they haven't arrested anyone for that one. So that's sort of standard terrorism. But yeah, I mean, part of it is like you had all these people, and some of them had believed something that was totally false and could never happen, which is that if they storm the Capitol, somehow Donald Trump will become president. Like, and there was never a logical series of events that would cause that to happen. Like, even if they caught Mike Pence and killed him, like that wouldn't have made Donald Trump stay as president.
Nope.
So it was insane and nonsensical to begin with, and then you had people, who knows? Like, I mean, there's sort of like the dynamics of like a crowd and a crowd of crazy type people, and they're all riled up, and then they're storming, and then probably there's people who in normal life never thought they would be carrying a podium through like Nancy Pelosi's podium through the halls of Congress. And so there's that sort of just bizarre aspect to it, that you had all these randos from all over the country,
realtors, and like then of course 14%. Then to your point though, 14% of the people arrested so far are military, when less than 1% of the country is active military. So that's another layer of this. And so to go back to 1/6, why I liked 1/6. Or why I guess I'm a little more comfortable with it than you are, is because it gives me a way of discussing the day's events without having to discuss like the nuances between QAnon shaman and the paramilitary types who are actually communicating with walkie-talkies, and I think like would have actually killed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez if they could have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can see why it makes sense to shorthand it. Like, yeah, because we still don't know all the facts. We still we haven't decided. Even if we're speaking in, if we're longer than a tweet, we still haven't decided what exactly to call this: riot, insurrection, uprising.
Hey, character limit. I'm getting 3 characters, 1/6. I'm just
exactly.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
So there's that, but I just resist the urge for it to go down in history as 1/6, because I don't know. It kind of like where's Trump's name needs to be in this somehow, because he's the one who created the lie that there was a steal to stop, and if Trump wasn't going to speak at that rally, then fewer people would have been there, and it would have been less organized, and possibly the people would not have decided to march to the Capitol afterwards. So he, it sort of elides his involvement, and so I think we need to, I don't know that I would working phrase is the storming of the Capitol, and what to call these people. Insurrectionists, even though that sort of elevates them, because a lot of these people were just fools and misguided morons, and
it has a vibe of nobility that I can't like whatever they call it. I'm like, that's too cool.
Rioters doesn't totally make sense either, because when you think of rioters, they're just like smashing everything, and obviously things were smashed. But then there's this video of the people walking through the rotunda, and they're staying within the the velvet ropes. So that's just an absurd detail where they could have really sacked it in sort of the medieval sense, but that didn't happen either. So it's just all strange and stupid. And
and a riot also implies a level of spontaneity that is not accurate to describe the Stop the Steal rally. That was advertised. Trump talked about it days in advance. Riot implies I've been in a riot. The Red Sox win the freaking World Series, or they beat the Yankees in 2004 when they weren't supposed to win, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. Let's go and knock over a bus."
Right.
That's a riot. No, you don't get a notice ahead of time that like, no, the Red Sox aren't going to lose this series. They're actually going to win.
Right.
But what Trump did, in no way, even with the nutty cosplayer LARPers, it wasn't a riot because it was a rally. To your point, Trump's essential to this. He really does need to be linked into this because it's his call to action of we're gonna go down now to the Capitol. And like I know Fox News keeps banging the peaceful part of it, but like the more important part of that sentence is the verb and the noun of we're going. It's not the adverb. It's
Yeah,
go
this
Capitol.
wasn't the March on Washington. Like
Yeah.
as soon as they got there, they were trying to break down the little like initial barriers and stuff. And it's well, I mean, I don't know. In some ways, it's such a fitting, bizarre, grotesque, stupid end to the Trump years, that I like in many ways Trumpism has just made me like throw up my hands and been like, this whole thing is just so stupid. And like so this is like the stupidest possible thing ever where they couldn't even they couldn't pull off an actual insurrection. They had these like confused grandmas and that woman Elizabeth from Knoxville who got maced as soon as she entered the Capitol, and somehow thought that everything was going to be, she was going to walk into the Capitol building and it's going to be a revolution, but she was going to be totally fine. So just this weird postmodern unreality of the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there is a surreal. The surreal quality to me is just thinking you're so invulnerable that you can storm into the Capitol and reasonably expect not to die. It's just never in 1,000 years would it ever dawn on me that I achieved some level of status or privilege or whatever where if you storm the White House lawn, they're gonna shoot you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like at least that's where my mind goes. So like no, there's a lot to your point. There's a lot of it that's very surreal, and yeah.
And really, even though you were joking about it earlier, the historical parallel maybe is actually Benghazi, because in that case there was this dispute about whether this was sort of a pre-planned attack that the military or intelligence should have seen coming, or sort of a spontaneous demonstration that was sparked by a video, I think, of someone burning a Quran or fake burning a Quran. This is like 2013, so I don't remember the exact details. But
initially the Obama administration tried to claim that that's what prompted it. And then eventually, I think later on it came out that this was an attack.
So it's possible that it was sort of like both things were true in the way that there were people who came to stop the steal with some sort of plan. They were wearing their tactical military gear, and maybe that was just cosplay, or maybe they're wearing that because they're like, okay, now's our chance finally. But then, if in Benghazi, Libya in 2013 or whatever, maybe there are some people who just saw the attack on the consulate starting and they're like, yeah, this is our chance to get the Americans. So let's join in and get our guns and start firing or whatever. So, and that's all. And, this time, 4 people died in Benghazi, 5 people died here. So I think there is some sort of weird parallel.
No, I think there's a lot. No, I was, only I guess only maybe half joking. When I say like it's Benghazi plus the Oklahoma City bombing, like that is kind of where I land on it. So like it does land in this veil of it's a terror attack to me. I don't think everyone there was there thinking I'm a terrorist. That said, I do also think there were a lot of paramilitary types who were trying to run a pseudo military operation inside of a mob of like clowns, which kind of reminds me a little bit of like, this is more mild than all fronts. When the Black Bloc was trying to use Occupy Wall Street as a staging ground for them to do like kind of more Weather Undergroundy type stuff. It was much more mild, but yeah. So kind of my 2 big takeaways here from this impeachment trial. One is there's a real issue with the speech and debate clause. And I didn't realize that there had been kind of a bit of a creep on how permissive speech and debate is. So to read real quickly into the show here, what the Constitution actually says about speech and debate. Speech and debate clause in the Constitution says, In all cases except for treason, felony, and breach of the peace, members of Congress are privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and from the same. For any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. So the idea being speech and debate on the House floor should be wide ranging, permissive, and even if it might potentially result in you saying something that could be incriminating in the service of the country while on the floor of the House and the Senate, the way the framers kind of conceived it, you should be allowed to say things. Essentially, is Johnny Cash able to testify, if he was a member of the House, that he shot a man in Reno just to watch him die? But so long as it's in service of arms control, something like that. Well, a little bit of a loose joke there. All right. So, anyways, one thing that I learned here this week, because I was wondering, why isn't Howley and Cruz and some of these other people in Congress who fostered this, in just as active a way as Trump? I mean, like Howley out there with the black glove, power to the people and everything. And Ted Cruz speaking at a rally, a Stop the Steal rally on the 3rd, and being willing to represent the cases for all the AGs from the different states. Like, these guys were just as essential in creating this Stop the Steal. There is a magic 1-6 button that we can push somehow. And Ted Cruz offered to fight for it. So I was like, why can't these guys be impeached? I mean, other than democratic fecklessness. Well, what it kind of goes back to is this issue involving representative in 2006 named John Murtha, who was sued.
I remember this guy, yes.
Yeah, I remember this name too. Like,
These are some Bush era deep cuts.
Yeah.
He had this huge head. I remember this old school guy elderly guy with a huge fat head. That's white hair. That's what I remember.
So he made a comment about a massacre in Haditha. In Haditha, 24 civilians were killed after U.S. troops under the Staff Sergeant Frank Wooderick opened fire at one of the many war crimes committed in Iraq, people. And later on, Wooderick pled not guilty, and he tried to sue Murtha for biasing things, it may be affecting his trial, tampering with juries, and that sort of thing. So Murtha put up a defense and essentially said that under the speech and debate clause, he was protected. Well, initially, he actually lost that first trial, but then he went on to appeal it. And then in 2009, the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Murtha and poured it on essentially another branch of a different law onto this. And so now speech and debate is understood to essentially protect nearly anything a member of Congress does that can be even loosely interpreted as in service of speech and debate on the House floor. Because in the case of Murtha was sued for a press conference. Like, Murtha was delivering a press conference as a member of the House of Representatives. So the argument essentially is it doesn't matter. In fact, what gives Howley protection for calling for the insurrection as a sitting senator is the fact that he's doing it as a sitting senator. Like, he would be more legally exposed if he was Josh Howley, private citizen. Mm-hmm. Which resulted this week. I don't know. You said you didn't watch a lot of the trial itself proper, but that resulted in the Trump legal defense essentially being, in semi-explicit terms, that politicians ought to be held to a lower standard of free speech than the rest of all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I assume this is, not knowing the background at all, I assume this is a bogus argument. I mean, so the main difference would be, Trump is in the executive, and the members of Congress are in the legislative, and so they're different branches. So there's that. I mean, as far as I know, and maybe we'll need a fact check on this, the Congress cannot impeach Ted Cruz; they can expel Ted Cruz.
They can vote to expel him from office.
Right. So impeachment is a legislative check on the executive, and so the people who are, or the judicial. So if you look at the list of people who have been impeached throughout American history, there's only about 25 or 30 of them. They're mostly judges. And they're mostly like judges who were flagrantly corrupt or something. Although I was scanning through this list, there's one who was impeached in the 19th century for drunkenness. But and then there's some executive, and then four presidential impeachments, and then some other executive branch like cabinet people, essentially, like the Secretary of War was impeached once, and I think that's it. So, but I think the since the like the legislative House and the Senate set their own rules, they can expel someone probably by just a majority vote. It almost never happens, but maybe if someone is so insanely corrupt and it becomes embarrassment, then they kick them out. I can't remember if who was the guy. This is another Bush administration or Bush era deep cut. The congressman from I think Louisiana who had the stacks of $100 bills in his freezer. Do you remember that guy?
Oh yeah.
He may have been. They may have maybe tried to do this, but it didn't work or something, or maybe they did kick him out. And that's how that guy whose
I think
they Gao, CAO. Remember that guy who like briefly was like the only Republican elected from New Orleans, and voted for the first version of the Affordable Care Act. I think these are all details from over a decade ago. But yeah, I think
I know, right? Yeah.
I think basically that's it. If someone is such a corrupt person or such an embarrassment, they can expel someone. So, and then there's also this thing about being the 14th Amendment was passed. Part of it is that they didn't want people who like served in the Confederate Army to immediately regain their seats in Congress. And so it was like if you were involved in an act of sedition or something, then you can be prevented from serving in Congress. And so that's kind of like a possible argument. You can see them to try to cashier, get Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley out of there. But I doubt. But that seems sort of like a long shot at this point.
So real quickly, I did look up on Congress.gov that the idea of can the House impeach a member of the Senate remains an open question. So I guess it could. To your point, it has not happened. However, the history says in 1797, House of Representatives voted to impeach William Blount, which was the first impeachment in the history of the Republic. 2 years later, the Senate concluded that Senator Blount was not a civil officer subject to impeachment. So essentially, the precedent that you can't impeach a senator stands on the grounds that the Senate once decided that no, we can't be impeached.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was a young country back then, and so they were still making up the rules and deciding what was what. This is like there was, especially in Trump's first impeachment, there was like this debate about like high crimes and misdemeanors and did what Trump was accused of rise to that level and stuff. And I, as someone who has no legal training whatsoever, it kind of seemed ridiculous to me because the president has never been successfully expelled from office, and so we don't really know what it would take to say this counts. It's really whatever they decide to do, and the arguments are sort of not phony exactly, but like if they had decided that if 2/3 of the senators had decided that this was worthy of conviction, then they did it, and this is not anything like a actual trial with an actual jury, because there's just like 50 different ways you can think of immediately where it's not like an actual
No, you don't
trial.
usually have all the witnesses on the jury.
Yes, and possible victims in this case were
Yeah,
also
yeah.
on the jury, and then usually the jury comes to a consensus verdict, and you don't know the names of any of the jurors, or this one there's a roll call, and so we know how each juror voted.
Jury
So
doesn't work with the defense.
It's really not, and like for some reason that there was some logical explanation for it, but I forget what it was. It wasn't the Chief Justice presiding as the judge in this. It was Patrick Leahy, who also was one of the had an interest in it as one of the jurors. So it is sort of like a trial, but it's not like a legal trial in any sense that usually these things are conducted, and the idea that like Trump's due process was not upheld, he couldn't have been thrown in prison because of this. He just would have he would have been convicted and then possibly barred.
Yeah, no, he got due process within a silly process. And I sort of think this is the important part of this second impeachment. And in a way, maybe kind of the meta historical takeaway for me about the Trump years, which is that impeachment is a broken mechanism. I think growing up, you and I are about the same age here. Bill Clinton went through impeachment, so it's not as though like we never thought about impeachment. And watching the Clinton impeachment, they didn't get to 2/3 majority. I think it's an open question. Should he have been removed from office based off of what he was, being accused of? Or what
They actually didn't even get a majority, if I'm recalling correctly. I think there was one charge where they got 50
he got 50.
votes for conviction, but the other ones got under 50, and so they never got. That was
Yeah.
the best they did. They didn't get 51. So
Didn't
this
they
time they got
censure him
57,
though?
So
Didn't they?
I think there was a censure, though. The whole, if you recall, the origin of MoveOn.org was this whole idea that we would censor him and then move on
Ah, okay.
to other business. So there may have been a censure, but I think like Lieberman wanted this to happen, there to be censure instead of impeachment, and then they went impeachment. So I'm not sure if there actually was a censure in the end. But I mean, something
Yeah.
I have thought about is, and especially remembering that time when Clinton was impeached, the only other impeachment at that point was Andrew Johnson, and the way I and probably most other people, up till I don't even know, like the traditional way we were taught in high school about this like weird historical thing was that it was very, very close and he was almost convicted. And then like one senator changed his mind or something. And that like sort of saved the presidency. And wasn't that a great thing that this senator, this profile in courage, he's possibly even one of the literal profiles of courage in JFK's book, like that he decided we would not expel Andrew Johnson, and that sort of preserved the strong executive. It wasn't that great. And like looking back at it, like, is that so great? Like,
Or was that pressure and long dealing? Yeah, right. Well, no,
that could have evolved into a more parliamentary system if we made impeachment like more routine. So I wonder if there's been any. That was like the AP US history version I was taught in the year 2000. I wonder if people have looked back on that and said, maybe this isn't the correct interpretation.
The way I learned it, it was definitely more of a cloud of, well, politics can sometimes be seedy business, and Andrew Johnson was a bad president, but like, sometimes all you have to do is change one mind, and it doesn't really matter which way you do it. And yeah, like I've always thought about impeachment, and it's always been in an abstract way something that I could just never conceive getting 67 votes for, even in a slam dunk case. But it's one thing to think about that, like in a abstract sort of manner. It's one thing to live through the Bush years and think that Bush should have been impeached by Pelosi for things like the war crimes we just discussed, that Murtha got himself into trouble talking about here. And watch that go past. But it's another thing, or it's a different layer of depth when you live through the Trump years. There have been numerous things that he should have been impeached on. Everything from inside the Mueller probe to I think he should have been impeached over the Georgia phone call 3 days. Find the 11,000 votes.
Yeah, if the Stop the Steal rally, if it had like rained that day and they called it off, like he very well could have been impeached for that phone call. Like that is certain, and they've opened a criminal probe in Fulton County, Georgia, to investigate that.
During the Russia probe, they would say, whether it was lefto skeptics or like Trumpy right wingers or anti-Trumpers like Andy McCarthy or whatever, they'd go like, well, where's the smoking gun? Where's the smoking gun? And people like myself would say, well, there's a lot of evidence that connect the dots here, but also I don't necessarily think it would matter if there was a smoking gun. And at long last here in January 2021, like there, to this point between Georgia and 1-6, like there's multiple smoking gun tapes that you can go and listen to and watch and see for yourself, and it changes nothing. And impeachment is. So I could talk about the cultural side of this, and that matters to me too. Like what does it say about Republicans and where we're at as a people, blah, blah, blah. Okay, interesting conversation. But in terms of impeachment, I think what it says very clearly is that the mechanism is clearly unable to address the task that it's tasked with addressing at this point. Like if you can't impeach and convict and remove someone for the Capitol riots, or the storming of the Capitol, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Don't want to go back to that section again. But if you can't get a conviction on that, what can you get a conviction on? Because political concerns will prevent you from getting to 67 votes constantly.
Yeah, and I mean, uh, Trump over the past 5 years occasionally has said something that's true, and one of them was, "I could choose someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and they would still like me," and so that basically played out. And some members of the GOP who have some kind of conscience or something voted to convict, maybe Romney, and then some of them who are retiring and just maybe are thinking about what their grandkids are going to think of them or something also voted to convict. But yeah, it wasn't enough. And the framers, of course, didn't anticipate the party system in any way, so they didn't think it would always just break down um, on partisan lines.
No, and actually, the Johnson example is the cherry on top of this argument, which is essentially like, so the Capitol riots were damning, and we saw them before our very eyes. But you might just say something like, "Oh, well, we live in very polarized times. Oh, like you make up any sort of narrative about the now." But what we have, even with the Johnson example, is yet another slam dunk sort of case against Johnson, where, like, yes, they should have been convict and remove him from office, but they didn't do that. And yeah, uh, I think that a takeaway for me from this is like they're not going to take a look at the speech and debate clause, but they ought to. And there ought to be a real kind of like get speech and debate back within the purview of what's supposed to be prescripted in the Constitution, which is like on the House floor when you're saying stuff in service of making a piece of legislation you're protected. But it's not once you get bequeathed the title of president, legislator, senator, you're protected because of speech and debate. And then also like impeachment, and I think this is a dead end because you need to amend the Constitution. How are you going to do that? This is another big problem for us. Is you can't get 67 votes for anything at this point. It's also a problem for the Bidenist wing of the party who has hopes of getting 60 votes to pass stuff. Right? Like they couldn't even get 60 votes on this. They only got 57. And I don't think you can rely on Bill Cassidy on a regular basis to get, passed up.
No, I mean, it's interesting. What would have happened? Why did McConnell decide not to convict? Apparently, he gave a speech lacerating Trump.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was funny.
But he could have just kept his mouth shut. So why is he playing it this way? I assume McConnell is always like seeing the best possible like path for him personally and for his interests. And you could have imagined it playing out where they were like a block of Republicans decided if we all do this together, then like they can't primary all of us, and especially the ones who want to run for president in 2024 have a very strong personal interest in stopping Trump from running again. I don't think he actually will run again either way, but you could have imagined Hawley and Cruz and some of these other jokers deciding like, yeah, let's disqualify one of our possible opponents who would be, if he did enter the field, would be the front runner from the start. But they didn't do that, so it's kind of like a collective action problem or something. And these people are probably averse to sort of like working together anyway. But yeah, if
so with Mitch to answer the
apparently Mitch said this was a vote of conscience. Like that's what he said to his caucus. Like, we're not whipping this, and we're not going to like bring the hammer down on you. This is like your own, leaving up to the great pure consciences of these horrible people who serve it as GOP senators. But if he had, what would have happened if he had just been like, no, let's get rid of this guy? Like, would he have brought 10 along with him? Who knows? And why exactly he initially signaled that he was open. Like, he seemed very angry about what happened. Both not only that his life was in danger, but he's like the ultimate sort of like the Senate is the greatest thing in the world, and he knows how to like, he's the ultimate operator of the greatest thing in the world. And the fact that it was like attacked and defiled seemed to really piss him off in a genuine way. That's like Ted Cruz was not genuinely outraged by it.
No,
So
like his wife resigned from the
yeah, yeah,
administration, and like, yeah, granted that was performative, and like 2 weeks left, and you don't get like any prize for doing it this late in the game. But at the same time, she also resigned. She put out a statement about the insurrection and how it was wildly appropriate. Mitch McConnell that day put out a statement on that. He did say vote your conscience. I think McConnell was trying to get a sense of how many votes he was going to have to whip. And I think the issue was that he only got up to 57. And
well, it's if he had, if he had tried, when they were actually, I watched almost none of the stuff live because I just get bored by almost any live political stuff. But I did watch the roll call, and were they said a lot of names who I was like, who is this person? I was
right.
like, Mrs. Who? Like there's a woman. Like, who is this woman GOP senator I've never even heard of? So like we all know Ted Cruz and Hawley and Sass, but like there's
He
I
could
don't know
have
15,
plucked
20
10, yeah, like
no name people
Crepos. Yeah, there's a lot of like, yeah,
who
Crepos.
ostensibly just go along with whatever, do whatever they're told, and hope to become like a lobbyist someday. So presumably Mitch could have been like, no, like you need to, this is what you have to do, and if you don't, like, I'm gonna fuck you over. And he
I
didn't.
think, yeah, he could, to that point, he should have tallied the 10 cheapest states to run in.
Correct.
No, seriously, like, because you're gonna have to deal with the primary in all those states because there's gonna be Trumpy wrath. But pull out your map, pull out your calendar, and just kind of get a sense of like who you can pluck away here. If he was able to get Cassidy, for example, Kennedy runs in the exact same state, and I know that John Kennedy likes to, be all folksy and toughtsy wuffsy, and like I feel like McConnell could have probably sold him.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't. I mean, it's interesting that Cassidy. I guess Cassidy is retiring or something, but he, for some reason, he seemed more able to do this. I don't know what his. I don't. He's sort of a no name. I guess Kennedy
Yeah.
has had some like viral moments and stuff. So he just kind of seems like a weird, ornery sort of guy who sometimes just says like, I'm going to do what I want. Like where he was really grilling that person who was nominated to some.
Kennedy likes to do the "I'm just an old country lawyer" sort of like, yeah, like he
Yeah,
likes
like
to.
that one where he totally humiliated this guy who like didn't know anything about civil procedure or whatever it was.
Yes, yeah,
So
that
he's
was
sort
funny.
of like a wild
Yeah.
card type, and you could have imagined him doing it. But yeah, I don't know. So it seemed possible, could have happened. Clearly, it didn't. But at the same time, they never. Apparently, this is the most bipartisan, verdict or whatever in U.S. history. So that's something. But
In certain ways, it went better for the Dems than expected. I think anything above 55 is definitively a win for the Democrats. And I mean, even being able to get 7 votes from the Republican caucus on this is a definitive win.
yeah, I mean, they got like they got Susan Collins, who famously Democrats always think Susan Collins is going to go with them, and then she doesn't at the end. So they actually did get her.
Yeah.
And Romney and Murkowski, and then a couple ones. Burr, who apparently maybe was pissed off at like the Trump administration for like investigating some insider trading he did or something. So who the hell knows? These people are like mostly amoral, horrible monsters. And
Burr's a weird one because it's like Burr's a dirty dog, but like also he during the Mueller probe was someone who was actually fairly like, no, we need to actually see this investigation out. And he was kind of a reliable Republican supporter of the probe. So like, yeah, no, but yeah, he's a weird one. To your point, I think the only person who's up for re-election is Murkowski. So like,
but if you recall, didn't she run as a write-in?
yes,
She lost the primary, so she has like she's proven she has her own independent power base and doesn't really need the party, and so she's closer to an independent than
yes,
a Republican, and so she feels free to say fuck the GOP. Like I'm enough of a brand. Like wasn't her father like also?
yes,
So there's
yes.
like always been a Murkowski in Congress since Alaska became a state or something. So she's set for life, and she can she can do what she wants.
No, yeah, she's set up and running in a small state like that. Like Alaska does not even have 1 million people in it. Like it's not a super expensive state for her to run in. And the population's super concentrated too. So yeah, no, it's a good gimmick that Murkowski's got. But yeah, like
Although I mean, the fact that Sass voted to convict, I guess he's another sort of one where for a long time, like, well, it's a little different than Susan Collins. Like Sass was sort of presenting himself as like the thinking man senator, and like he was really, and he did like denounce Trump in various ways. And you can imagine, like he's from Nebraska, and you can imagine a much crazier, you know, conservative challenging him and winning the primary.
Yeah, he
But he
might have
also,
a tough primary ahead of him.
yeah, he also seems to hate actually being in the Senate, and I would too. It seems like I was actually thinking about this, this past week. Like, you get to the Senate, okay, that's great, and you're in American history, and you get to vote on all this shit. But like the actual day to day and the job seems horrible and really boring, and they had to sit through this, awful trial and masks, for hours on end. And like, why don't they just okay, you get one term, that's 6 years. Maybe you get reelected, that's 12 years. And then you can go off and basically do anything. You could be a lobbyist, you could like run a small Christian college, you can, you know, basically do whatever, get a Fox News contract or something. Like, why, why do they need to like get reelected over and over and over again to this awful job? Like, it's kind of baffling.
Running for re-election seems to me to be like the most unpleasant thing in the world. Because it's like you have to spend, several months explaining why everyone else kept you from accomplishing the things that you said that you were going to do.
Yeah, so maybe Sass, who fancies himself kind of an intellectual, and actually, I think I have never been able to prove this, but he may have been a TA in a course I took in college, because he was a graduate student of political science for this one particular course where it had so many TAs that there was like a head TA, and it was this guy who wore a cowboy hat. I remember, and so that could have been Ben Sass. But anyway, so he has a PhD from Yale, and he doesn't seem to actually like being a senator, understandably so. And so, yeah, he probably would be better off running a small Christian college or something.
Yeah, no, I think also to that point, the vote to convict here means that he's not really interested in running for president.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. No, I think like that's the big signal.
I don't think he doesn't have a constituency in the party at this point. So
No, I think he was trying to test balloon his brand with that book that he put out a couple of years ago. It was a little bit of like well, it was like a bootstrapsy sort of book. I don't remember
it was something about no one is a grown up anymore.
Yeah, exactly. No one's a grown up anymore.
So let him be a columnist for Newsweek or National Review or something, and that can be his. He can ride off into the sunset with that.
And to that point, like people like Jonah Goldberg and a lot of like those National Review guys they're fond of Ben Sass. He is up their alley. But yeah, no, I think that explains guys like him. Cassidy's an interesting one. Why didn't McConnell flip? Why did McConnell behave in the way he behaved? I think he knows at some point they're going to come to regret this vote. The way they acted here, this vote is going to hurt them long term. And one of the arguments that the Democrats made during the trial this week that I thought was the most compelling, if anyone's mind was still open to be changed on this sort of thing, is what happens to y'all when Trump runs again and he loses?
Well, I actually tweeted putting, I'll put my marker down that he's not going to run again.
Yes.
Because I think he kind of knows that he would either lose the primary or lose in the general. So he more than anything, he doesn't want to lose. He wants to win. And so he can win by having his own TV network or, selling his own brand of body pillows, to Fox News viewers or whatever the fuck.
Another way that he likes to win, though, is by making other people lose.
That's true. He likes inflicting cruelty on his enemies, but he can. I mean, from the beginning, and back in, you're a longtime follower of me on Twitter. Back in 2016, I thought the whole thing was like just a hoax to get him to get a lot of attention and stuff, and he's like was trying to fail. That the producer's theory as it became known, and so that didn't turn out to be true. But I essentially think he never really wanted to be president. He wanted attention and to sell hats, and he can get attention by taking over Newsmax or OAN or something like that, or starting a web channel, and then he'll be able to do a couple hours of work a day and spend a lot of time golfing and watching TV, and that's really what he wants to do. And he doesn't care about policy or really even politics.
No, I don't think he cares about that. I think he's just going to miss the adulation of the crowds. Like this is a guy who loves the mass communication
Yeah,
thing.
well, he could still do rallies.
Yeah,
It's just what he wouldn't be running for anything, but he could. I mean, he likes
well, he might
he likes.
run as an auspice essentially. Like,
Well, he could sort of like say he's going to be touring the country to launch a new web series or something like that. He could have the rallies that way, and the MAGA faithful would come out, and then he could do his whole shtick, and he could denounce the media and the lying New York Times and Grant Carter and his bad food restaurants and all this other stuff. So like he could sort of do that, and it wouldn't be as many people because probably some portion of the MAGA faithful will have like gone back to their normal lives now that Trump is off the scene. So, but he would still get that like jolt of you know 5,000 people clapping for him and cheering. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I what you're describing, the him not running again, it's not implausible to me by any stretch. Like it seems very plausible, but I think it's also equally as plausible that the guy decides to run again. And if he does decide to run again, because he's the former president, and also because, as Bernie sort of illustrated yesterday in a thing that I think was deeply useful, um, they refuse to really ever break what I refer to as the Trumpy kayfabe, or what the Democrats refer to as the big lie. Like they don't want to break the narrative that is that Donald Trump won the election, and that like on some fundamental level Joe Biden is not legitimately president right now.
mhm.
And if you really believe that, and if you leave that narrative unchecked, then it makes Trump's case for why he should be the nominee so much easier to make, because
Because he's the rightful.
right, this is the rightful king, and we must restore him to the throne.
Okay, so
Uh,
he's like Bonnie Prince Charlie.
no, and
Um,
this is precisely why I think it's essential that the Republicans strike down that narrative. I think they're stupid to not. I get the underpinning stuff here, but they're setting themselves up in a serious way by not striking it down. They keep taking the easy way out.
yeah, and that has been the idea that they could sort of play along with Trump and somehow get the better of the situation has constantly happened over and over again. And it's like you know the people for decades have thought, I will ally myself with Donald Trump in some way and I will benefit from it. And it turns out that he benefits from it and they end up covered in shit. And
Yeah, there's a
that
serious
continues.
debasement quality, and like people don't like. Wow, I'm being debased. This is really horrible. But like, unless you decouple, you're gonna keep getting debased.
Right. So I mean, so multiple things have happened. One is like Trump is old. He's not as old as Biden, but in 4 years he'll be 77 or something.
I call this the motorized scooter theory now, where Donald Trump ends up in a motorized scooter and the magic is gone.
Right. So, the aging process will continue. He may just drop dead, or he may become even more senile than he is currently. So he won't want to do it that way. And
Scooty
that's,
Donald does not have the same magic.
yeah, that's a real possibility. And then, yeah, I think you know, what's weird about Trump, I mean, there's many things that are weird about Trump. One of them is that while he likes winning, he also likes being saying that he was treated very unfairly. And so, like, they stole it from me. They treated me. He likes playing the victim
Mm-hmm.
almost as much as he likes being the victor. And saying, like, they stabbed me in the back, the election was stolen from me, he can ride that off into the sunset. And he can have the Trump news channel or self-published Trump books or a Trump app, which you have to subscribe to for $6.99 a month to get like the latest updates from Donald, sort of like monetizing a Twitter feed because he can't actually be on Twitter. So something like that, some sort of scam, makes a lot more sense to me than actually re-entering the political arena, because he doesn't. He just he's sort of like pre-political in a lot of his stances and beliefs, where he just like he is sort of like closer to a monarch than a modern political figure. He just likes attention, adulation, pomp and circumstance.
And where else can he get that in terms of free media but running for president?
But he has tens of millions of people who believe in him and are with him for now. And if he can get all of them subscribed to whatever the fuck, then he gets the money coming in. I mean, the other thing is he has all these
He'll be
lawsuits,
fine with that. But
and like he needs to pay off Deutsche Bank, like a domestic Deutsche Bank loan or something like. So he's kind of screwed unless something really changes.
that
And
might
to
be
live in
another
Engels
reason why he
land,
wants to run again, though, so that he can get back to the legal protections of being president.
well, but he'll never win again. But I think he knows that. But I mean, the other thing is he can sort of keep his. He immediately formed this like sort of political action committee or something, and started taking donations, telling the faithful that this was to fight the stolen election when really they spent like 1% of it. And so you can imagine that he keeps that going. He lives at Mar-a-Lago. He says Mar-a-Lago is both his office and his home, and so he can pay for the landscaping and everything else through the money that is being donated by the MAGA faithful. And so that's a fine scam to keep going, for the time being. And he really is sort of a short-term thinker. And so I don't see like
Not
a
my
long-term
Donald.
plan. He's like, how do I survive until the next day, sort of thinking. And what are they going to be saying? What's the headline going to be tomorrow? Not what people might be thinking in 6 months. So I think he's obviously not going to change or improve in any way, like in his personal behaviors or patterns or thoughts. It's going to stay the same and get worse. And yeah, I just think he's a natural con artist and scammer, and he's going to go back to that sort of world, appearing on Fox and Friends, calling in, and then enjoying his day playing golf and watching TV. I really do think that.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I did find I I found the picture of him running again and losing to be compelling. You know who else found it compelling 4 years ago was Ted Cruz, who was worried that when Donald Trump lost in the primaries, which he didn't end up doing, of course, but Ted Cruz talked about how there might be a riot at the Republican National Convention. Flash forward to 4 years later, and oh, Ted Cruz, he's nothing if not consistent.
Now, as someone with knowledge of Texas politics, is there any chance that, I guess in 4 more years, a Democratic contender could come up and unseat Cruz because the state is turning bluer and Ted Cruz is like more and more people hate Ted Cruz?
Absolutely. No, I think if it really depends on how the Democratic Party chooses to approach it. If the National Party gets behind the idea that they want to dethrone Ted Cruz and that they want to treat the Ted Cruz race as one of the rock star Senate races that they really want to get the money into, I know that Republicans were willing to flip and vote for someone like O'Rourke, who I'm guessing, to East Coast listeners or whatever, does not strike them as particularly progressive. But out here in Texas, like O'Rourke's pretty left of center for
Yeah, I mean,
Texas.
especially in guns, he like
Yeah.
you would confiscate assault weapons
And
or
if
whatever.
and if O'Rourke builds out his brand a little bit more, and by build out his brand, he's got 4 years. Like he can go a long way from standing on the tables, Beto. He can get to being, and he's been good on a lot of things. Like he can stay good and connect roots to El Paso, really kind of build up a base in the state here. I think he can win. I think the Democratic Party, looking at the Electoral College map, one of my big takeaways is Biden won a lot in the popular vote. The Electoral College map margin was still actually kind of narrow.
Right.
And the Democratic Party would be really wise to flip Texas or start putting some
Yes.
no, just put some serious effort into flipping Texas.
I mean, if they flip Texas, it seems like they kind of break the back of the GOP as currently constituted.
it's the one state that, like, I actually think they have a path forward on that. And it's a one state KO strategy. You have to go all in. Yeah, it's like a no subtlety strategy. Like you make it know, like we're fighting the culture war in Texas now. Will the Republicans fight back? I think so. But no, I really do believe that Cruz can be knocked off. He's not well liked. The other thing that really dogs him on this is the way he treats his wife.
Really?
It's
And that he like didn't stand up on her behalf.
yeah, yeah. It's independent of the politics. It's. I think there are a lot of Republicans, and you guys saw this with Cornyn. Cornyn just doesn't have any of the demerits. It's not just being like twerpy and like kind of like the weird, like he's a Republican, but he's also like a theater club kid thing. It is. It's like you just Texan's like a person who just stands up for their spouse. You know, it's like it's a Southern thing, I suppose, on some
Yeah,
level.
that's interesting. Yeah, and Cruz, everyone who has any contact with him seems to detest him.
Yes.
Um, so that that if you you know I don't know, if you have some sort of like moderate, bland, handsome man, maybe it's Beto or someone else who
Some
could.
people irrationally like Beto O'Rourke. That is not a phrase that really anyone says about Ted Cruz, except that like if like the sentence would be like if anyone likes Ted Cruz, that's irrational. Like whereas like some people might go, oh that Beto O'Rourke's kind of hunky. Oh that Beto O'Rourke skateboards a little bit. He seems like he'd be a cool stepdad. Like
Right. I mean,
yeah.
there was that famous tweet, one of the most famous tweets of the Trump administration or Trump era, the woman who was envisioning the type of lover that Beta would be, and that it would leave her with her calves cramped, and that
Mm.
was that was like poetry and instantly famous. But yeah, I mean that's certain people have certain appeals to
No
different
one says
positions.
that about Ted Cruz. No one
No,
talks
I
about
know.
calf
Yeah, I mean,
curling.
he's like repulsive in almost every way. So it's incredible that he has managed to rise throughout national politics and was sort of the the runner up in 2016 in the GOP primary, when he's such a awful
But,
figure.
but but to that point, I think it's a real testament to him that, or a testament to how unlikable he is, that he couldn't even siphon enough stroke from the Republicans. Like they didn't necessarily love Trump, and I think they would have liked not a Kasich alternative, but like a standard kind of middle of the party Republican alternative. And Cruz, because he's so phony and schmarmy, um, like those are kind of the other two things. It's like the spouse thing's a component of it. It's not like he's just fake on everything.
Yes.
That everything feels fake about the guy. Republicans couldn't even really buy into him, and that gets to your other point. Institutionally, he's got a lot of enemies. People just don't like the guy. I remember the line from Al Franken's book about Ted Cruz, which is like, I like Ted Cruz more than most people in the Senate like Ted Cruz, and I hate Ted Cruz.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think that's that. I don't like it's constructed humorously, but I think Franken's just basically speaking truth there. I think just people don't like the guy.
Yeah, and obviously Cruz wants to be president, and he's sometimes lumped in with Hawley and Cotton, who are all sort of like roughly the same age and all are conservatives who went to Ivy League schools, and I think that sort of type does not have broad appeal in the party. Um, Trump was Trump went to an Ivy League school, but he seemed like such a strange sort of like dirty dog figure, and like he had the whole like low class fast food stuff, that he was able to overcome that. And usually you think like,
He doesn't scan as a patrician, even though Donald Trump is like the ultimate patrician and totally like fetishizes like the patrician lifestyle and like
right.
yeah. But he didn't come off like a patrician.
Yeah, so I tweeted a couple weeks ago like, no Republican who went to Ivy League law school is going to win the nomination for president. The party just doesn't seem to be interested in that kind of stuff. They're more interested in theatrics and
No, like a guy
like
like
attacking enemies.
Billy from New Jersey who comes in and just he tells it like it is. Would have a field day with someone like Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley or whatever, so long as he didn't get the like scornful media treatment or whatever. And like that was the other part of Trump's mojo is that he didn't get the scornful media treatment because they kind of knew him.
Well, yeah, and um, the idea that like the way Trump operated was sort of like someone who was calling into a sports radio show and complaining about something, like that sort of a conservative type. Yeah, that sort of
Shove it up your ass, conservatism.
yeah, that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
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 fuck you,
yeah.
and who your enemies are. And I think actually I can't remember if I said this on my podcast at some point, but you know, like when the Trump administration started, it seemed like the he was going to really bring the hammer down on people who are crossing the southern border illegally and Muslims, and there was the Muslim travel ban, and of course, they built some of the wall. They did horrible things on the border,
And people like
hurting
Steve
families and
Miller
stuff.
really cared about that, but Trump didn't give a shit about that
Yeah,
really.
but then when you get towards the end of his presidency, the enemies were not, Hispanic migrants who were like working like without papers. It was the media, it was the Democrats, and whoever. It was just an amorphous blob of the people who are against you, and I'm gonna protect you. So he was, I mean, he was much more anti-media than he was anti-Muslim. Like he really,
I mean,
maybe,
insofar as he has a philosophy, it's a philosophy of media, right?
yeah,
And he actually has axioms and coherent axioms that he's sustained throughout his entire life. So like he really does have a philosophy of how you do media. When they hit you, you hit back. You call them, get in front of the story, be a fake
I
person.
mean, he's
Yeah,
before he entered politics, he was much more a media figure
media guy.
than a business world figure.
Yeah.
And I did an episode of my show with the TV critic James Poniewozik, who wrote this book about Trump and television. And he talks about how Trump turned himself into sort of like the living embodiment of the idea of like wealth and American business success, and how he would show up on Fresh Prince of Bel Air, on an episode where the gang was visiting New York or something. And so he was like a living embodiment of this thing. So he was very skilled in branding himself and creating this myth of himself. And then The Apprentice made that, brought that even stronger across the country. But yeah, he's, he rose up through the tabloids in New York in the 70s and 80s, and then became a national figure in the 90s, and then reality television made him sort of iconic. And if he had never decided to go to politics, he would really be remembered for that, not for the buildings, the great, like, beautiful buildings that he put up.
No, I mean, to me, he's always been a brand about being wealthy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Robin Leach's voice on Lifestyles and the Rich and Famous. Like, Donald Trump was kind of like that. It was like just like a mimetic shorthand
Yeah.
for yeah
Yeah.
for
And
being wealthy.
yeah, and he appeared in a lot of like rap lyrics as just
Yes,
a symbol of wealth. And so he, like, his real genius, I think, is for branding.
yes.
And he wrote that to the White House. And then you think, what does he want to do now at age 73 or 74 or whatever? you know it's probably going to be thinking more about the Trump brand than about, like, I really have to finish building that wall.
No, I mean, just to your point, dude. I think if he ran again and got into office, he's not going. He might say, "I'm going to finish the wall," but like the wall would be no more. If you gave him 10 years, that wall would not be done.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. Like he didn't care about that. I mean, I remember when he would have executive time and he would be watching the coverage of himself on television, and he would put out tweets, and sometimes it would be like. It would be as though he's watching himself on TV and tweeting about the show like somebody needs to help Donald Trump. Like he would tweet out like do something sometimes, just like to no one in particular, just like scream like do something like help
Yeah.
me. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I think this was one of Ponowazik's points, is that, like, the like the child's dream watching television is like somehow you enter the TV and like get to be with your friends, like at the bar cheers, or the friends on the TV show Friends or something. And then, like, Trump sort of did get to do that because, like, everyone was talking about him and all his friends at Fox News were talking about him, and he would tweet something and then minutes later he would see it on the
See,
screen. So it was like this crazy
no,
interaction.
the ultimate. I mean, and you know how sometimes when people get older, their mind reverts back to a childlike. The child. I mean, I don't know, man. I
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah,
he might want that juice, baby. He
yeah,
might
this is
want that juice.
Dan Dresner did the thread of Trump as toddler,
Toddler in
and he
chief,
got
yeah.
over 2,500 entries of, yeah, he's very childlike. And is
No,
he
I think
gonna,
those impulses will only get stronger as he gets older,
yeah,
too.
he's not getting any better. He's not gonna
Yeah,
have a,
no,
like,
no.
come to Jesus moment. So yeah, I really think he's, he'll continue to call into Fox and Friends. He'll hold rallies. I'm sure he loves the fact that Kevin McCarthy flew down to Mar-a-Lago to, like, have a photo taking with him,
Oh,
and so that will
well,
continue to happen.
and Lindsey Graham, I mean, here's the other thing, too. And this is why we'll get back into his head at some point. I think I would believe a lot more that he'd forget about politics if politics could forget about him. But what the Republicans know is that they need him to win elections. And the Georgia lesson for them has really led them to believe that an important part of them winning, and I think they're right about this, is making sure that all of his people are on deck. And the only way to make sure all of his people are on deck is to get him involved in the mix at some point. Like I was reading before we got on the air here, Lindsey Graham is going down to meet with him this weekend about this, about 2022, and sort of saying, well, we can't. He can't run. He actually said he can't run again without us, and we can't win without him. And to your point, I don't know if he wants to run again, but I think what he'll start to hear in Lindsey and Kevin McCarthy's beseechings is leverage and an opportunity to squeeze some nuts.
But what does he want? What does he get out of it?
We will find out. Yeah,
it's hard to know what at this point Lindsey Graham
yes, exactly.
offers to Trump. And yeah, it's hard to know what will happen in 2022. It depends a lot on the economy and how the vaccine, if the vaccine rollout goes well, then the economy will rebound, and then there'll be the Biden boom. And I think Democrats and Biden will do very well in 2022. If things don't go well that way, then it's probably the opposite. But where was I going with this? I think, like, are the Republicans better or worse off with Trump on the ballot? It seems like they can't win with him, they can't win without him. There's even more people hate him after January 6th in the general populace than did before. And yet, if he sequesters himself, or if he like turns on particular people in the GOP, then they're screwed. So I think they really are in a pickle.
Yes.
About him, and everyone, including him, would probably be better off if he, dropped it tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't like. The right way to put this is Trump can't live with them, can't live without him.
Yeah.
No, I that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know how this plays out. I saw that quote. I was like, how the hell do they get away from this guy? And I don't know that they have an answer right now. Let's change gears here a little bit. Do you watch The Mandalorian? Are you into The Mandalorian?
I was a latecomer, and so I watched the entire thing over the past couple months.
It's pretty dope, right? Like
it's the memory of it is strong in my mind.
Yeah, no, it's a great show.
I liked it.
Yeah, Gina Carano got sacked from The Mandalorian. For those of you who did not hear, I will summarize this as quickly as possible. She's working for Disney, who makes The Mandalorian. Disney and the Star Wars franchise has been, especially with the relaunch of this new trilogy, very forward-minded in terms of social awareness, doing casting, writing parts for that. Disney is a company, very socially aware as a company. And Carano is conservative. Carano is one of these conservatives. She's a free speech conservative, and by free speech conservative, I mean she thinks that like free speech applies to literally all areas and sections of life, not just constitutional restriction. And she was working for Disney, doing The Mandalorian. Put out one tweet, or one comment on her Twitter, where she put up her pronouns, and her pronouns were beep bop boop, because making a little rib on people who do pronouns.
Yeah. She kind of seemed to be doing a sort of trigger the libs, sort of, posting series of posts.
Yes.
Kind of like Don Jr. style.
Edgelordy. No, she's an edgelord's conservative. I mean, this is a person who used to get punched in the face for a living.
Yeah, so you're into MMA stuff, right?
I'm a wrestling guy more than an MMA guy.
Okay, so she was only MMA. She wasn't ever.
She was never in WWE. No.
Okay.
She was trying to do like action stuff too. Like, I mean, like, there is, I think, some hope for Gina at various points here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but one thing that's interesting about her character is, as far like she is sort of based on like her physicality and the way she played the character. Like she was sort of a like badass woman character that was somewhat unique to the Star Wars universe. Where she could like punch out a guy, or she had this huge like Gatling gun sort of laser thing that she was shooting, and so she wasn't like Princess Leia or
She's not
Rey.
damsel in distress in any
Yeah,
way,
she was
shape, or
like
form. Yeah.
kicking ass and taking names, and it was a pretty good performance. Um, I thought so. She has, not that the acting in Star Wars is generally super
No,
great,
but
but like she
she
was pretty good.
she she had some star power on the show. I will say one of my biases when the story was happening, I realized is I really didn't want her to have to be written off the show because like I like her on the show. I like her character on the show. I think she's to your point. Like it's not like Star Wars is ever revelatory acting.
Right.
It's Star Wars. It's just a fun show or a fun series or whatever. And
And,
like
and they've definitely committed to more seasons of the show.
yes, yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah, for sure. No, they're definitely doing more
Because
seasons. And
not to spoil, but the way it ended in season 2, that could have been
you
the end
could
of the
sack off
series.
the whole thing, but
Yeah,
I mean, the part of
but
it
I
is
guess
that
it's a cash cow, and
it's a
everyone just
cash
loves
cow.
Baby Yoda. So
I mean, this is the other kind of disappointing thing, though, is like one of the reasons people loved The Mandalorian up to now is that this was the thing that finally united the whole fan base again.
yeah,
Um, Essentially, like, the prequels. There was like a lib conservative split on the prequels, but I would also say that there was a split. This is where I came down. There was a good writing, bad writing split, and many of us thought that the writing on in the new movies was just bad. Like it was just not a well written. It
yeah.
was
I liked the Force Awakens, but
yes,
the other two were like I didn't like, and I thought they were like bad in unique ways. Like and the last one especially, I thought was close to like a total disaster. So
yeah. Well, I thought eight was so draggy. Like it sort of redeems itself at the end, but like the final stuff on the ice planet, you had to really suffer through all of the space stuff through that. And I found the space stuff in like what I'm talking about, like the battleships and
yeah.
like the going through the warp or whatever, like just very draggy.
Yes, I actually did an episode reviewing two separate episodes with Daniel Kaufman on my show. If people, for some reason, want to hear my extensive hour-long thoughts on both of these episodes, you can find those in the archives. A culture determined, but yeah, they were. Yeah, I think most fans were pretty like bummed out after the end of the ninth Star Wars
Oh, just the
movie.
way they wrote Luke too. But yeah, and Luke. I mean, to this point, Mark Hamill's not thrilled with the way that his character was written. So I mean, anyways, Mandalorian was sort of reunifying a lot of this stuff and kind of reharmonizing everything, right down to bringing Luke back into picture and maybe kind of reconstructing Luke's storyline a little bit to be a little more satisfactory,
Mhm.
a little more complete. And it's unfortunate that this popped up, but Carano really made it like impossible, in my opinion, for Disney not to fire her. It seemed like they had met with her on multiple different occasions. Were kind of like stop commenting publicly about this stuff. Um, and what finally ultimately got her fired was this comment. For those of you who haven't seen it, she makes a comment where she essentially compares being a conservative and having conservative views as it's a weird comparison. Even like I'll just read it because it's I wouldn't say it's overt. It's Semitic in the sense that it brings it up. It's not anti-Semitic, but it's also just a horrible comparison.
Yeah.
Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Because history is edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where the Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? It like
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's so dumb that I can't even necessarily get to malice. Like there's a lot of victim, like, oh, I'm the victim here. Oh, woe is me. Oh, they're screwing me over. But like,
Yeah, I mean, it's stepping back. It's strange that anyone who is in a Hollywood actor or someone who has any sort of like that kind of prominence where they're trying to appeal to everyone, like they just don't keep their mouth shut on social media entirely. Like just pay a publicist to tweet and Instagram for you. That's what I certainly would do. And yeah, and if anyone was advising her, they would say, the one thing you should not do is compare yourself to a Holocaust victim. Like definitely don't do that. And so no one was telling her that, or she wasn't listening. And yeah, so she must really believe this stuff because all of her interests align with just stop tweeting, stop gramming, and shut your mouth, and then like you'll get to keep on being in the series, and then you'll have like action figures made of you, and you get to go to fan conventions for the rest of your life. And so,
You
but she
literally
must
will
really
be.
believe this shit.
You will really be set for life if you can just shut the hell up about
Right?
politics for 4 years. Shut up. Like
Yeah.
that's all you have to. No, I mean, and to this point, if you're Disney and you're looking at this and you're going, yeah, like we like her performance on here, but like she's got to either one really believe this stuff, two be so dumb that like you can't talk her out of this stuff. They were in a position where, and also like they're a company, at will employment, and all of that. You don't get to kind of espouse these views and then go, oh, I'm a victim of at will employment. No,
Right.
yeah, like you're your own victim. But the
Yeah.
one thing that this got me thinking about this week, which is like kind of separate from Gina Carano, that was the starting off point because this thing came up in another debate. I was watching. Do you ever watch Vouch? Familiar with Vouch or Destiny? Any of these
No.
guys on YouTube? They do like politics stuff on YouTube, and these two guys are debating each other. And one, Destiny pulls the tweets of Vouch and like is reading off of two tweets for basically the entirety of this debate, and he's using this as the linchpin of his argument. And the whole thing was very silly to me, and it started to get me to think about like how much weight should we really be giving a person's tweets or Instagram posts or whatever when it is on a topic that they don't have a professional level opinion on. And I think we often think about this in the context of like politics, but like someone could be a toxic sports fan, but like if Gina Carano was like the most toxic version of a New York Yankees fan, or most toxic version of a Red Sox fan,
I bet she likes the Yankees.
yeah,
That's just my guess, but I bet she's a Yankees fan.
she might be. Well, given her politics, she might be a Red Sox fan too. Not making a comment on Boston. Anyways, so like I could see her, if she was a really toxic version of one of these fans, telling like Mets fans to go eat shit and die. Like, Mets fans, like, should we fire Gina Carano over being a toxic sports fan? And if the answer on that's no, is it like why?
Yeah, I think so. I think you should tune in to my episode with Phoebe Malspovi because we cover some similar ground about sort of what is a tweet, why does anyone tweet, which is an interesting question, especially given the fact that if you're not famous, there's almost nothing good, really good could actually happen to you when you post something on social media, and possibly something really bad could happen to you, like you lose your job or something. So why does anyone do this? It's kind of strange. And yeah, so what, if it weren't like for Donald Trump, then I think Twitter would have stayed. Maybe I guess she mostly posts on Instagram, but like Trump legitimated Twitter in a way that sort of didn't make sense because Twitter was this weird thing, limited characters, a bunch of
They're like
weirdos.
half thoughts. They've always been like
there was
quarter
anonymity
thoughts. Yeah.
versus Facebook. Like, to say something I said in this episode, which you can find on Monday, searching for Culture Determined on your podcast feed.
You've plugged this show a number of times, and I appreciate it. I applaud it.
I gotta these days. I gotta in this economy, but
ABW baby, always be working.
So into like 2014, if you had said, okay, political outsider figure is going to use social media to vault himself like into the mainstream of the presidency, you probably would have said, oh, they're probably on Facebook because everyone is on Facebook. Everyone and their grandmother is on Facebook, and Twitter was sort of this niche thing, like 10-20% the reach of Facebook, and it was mostly like weirdos and weird memes and jokes and stuff, and like that's what it should be. And just the fact that Trump used it to become president, it suddenly seemed like this thing itself was important. When really, like,
it is a place for shit posting.
Yeah, it's for dunking, it's for flaming, it's for arguing with people. It's not a place for conversations, which is what Jack Dorsey and the people who work at Twitter headquarters seem to think it is. Like,
I know when they expanded things out to 280 characters, my big problem with that was you fundamentally misunderstand the instrument that you've created here. Like, this is not for official statements from the fucking, from the desk of Chris Novembrino. These are like brain droppings.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even a blog post, it's
yeah.
like, so that's what sort of it like should be, and then Trump elevated it in this way it wasn't meant to be, and so then it became like if someone tweeted something possibly offensive in 2013 and someone dug it up, then they get in trouble. And yeah, so I expressed a hope in this podcast that now that Trump has gone from the presidency and gone from Twitter, it will sort of like recede back into what it should be, just a niche site for weirdos and media people and time wasters. And, like maybe the normies can like return to Facebook and Instagram. Of course, Corona seems to mainly use Instagram, and as an attractive woman, that makes sense why she would mainly use Instagram. But that also like, you know, it,
Well, and now TikTok's becoming just as quickly a place for weirdo,
yeah,
weirdo.
I mean, any
Yeah.
service where like weirdos can find their niche in any service, but there's certainly more normal people are on Instagram than Twitter and Facebook much more so. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's strange. I mean, I don't have like strong sympathy for Corrado. I mean,
This part of the conversation, I just want to be clear, is really not about her. Like, because she basically was conducting herself in a way that I don't know how you possibly keep her under retainer, because you have every reason to suspect that comments like that one that I just read are going to keep coming. Yeah,
yeah, and
like,
even
there's.
someone at Disney like took her aside a couple months ago to be like, "Hey, you just put a lid on this," and like take
I
a break.
believe they tried.
Right. So it's kind of
I
like
don't know, but I believe that they tried with
it's
her.
kind of like near a tandem where it's like this person just had to post, and in a way, like as someone who also just has to post, I gotta respect that. Like this is a true poster, and like she like they just had to they couldn't keep it in. They had to let it out.
Yeah,
And
right.
so
No, Near Tannen's actually a really good example here. Like, I know on some level, both the Republicans and the Bernie people love stringing up Nira for her shitty tweets, and she has expressed a lot of garbage views through the years, and she expressed a lot of garbage views in the DNC emails too. Like, I mean, her like, it's when I say they're not official statements from the desk of Near Tannen or whatever. No, but like, they're also being written by your hand too. It's like,
yeah,
they're not official statements, but they're also your voice. Um, and I think we did get a lot of that with Near Tannen, but at the same time, like, her tweeting about how she hates, the lefties, or how Ted Cruz is mouth breathing shit eater or whatever. Like, I don't. Does that really matter? Why should we really care? But then going back to your point, like, why does anyone post? Like, why does a Gina Carano or a Neera Tanden need to post under a handle that identifies them explicitly as Neera Tanden or Gina Carano? If they were doing it under a burner account, they could scratch that itch, but they clearly need something that actually attaches their shit posting to them.
yeah, and then this gets into sort of like the addiction, of social media and the fact that it provides you with these little like bits of positive reinforcement throughout the day, and you see your likes and retweets, especially if you have any sort of large platform, and then that feels good, even though it basically nothing happened. It like tricks you, or you trick your brain into thinking you've like done something good when really you've done almost nothing and possibly done something bad by participating in this. And one of the essay of Phoebe most movies that we were talking about in this episode, she says, who there's this idea of like you need to like so that people like liberals or leftists sometimes say like you need to do the work like before you're ready to come out with a statement or something, or present yourself on the scene. And like, but if you think doing the work is tweeting, then like who are you working for? You're working for Twitter. Like Twitter's the only one that like the giant corporation is the only one that's really benefiting from you like spending time on that platform.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, especially like when I think about how I write the show, I write the. Oftentimes, I will quote unquote be doing the work on Twitter in the sense of like I'm spitting out chunks of ideas that might end up on the show slate. Like literally taking when I'm writing the show slate. Sometimes I go through my tweets. I see if I said anything that I want to weave into my commentary here, and then that ends up in the final official statement from the desk of Chris Brino that is the podcast that comes out in the end after I edited everything. It strikes me as weird though that like, yeah, to your point, the same people who are mostly on the internet who shitpost all day, like we're dragging people over other shit postings. I just I think there are people who'd go, I can't believe I'm getting fired from my job for this tweet, who are very happy to fire someone else from another job for a tweet.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I guess the strangeness of someone like Tandon or Carano is like they have shit going on, and like they're successful in some. It's not like the person in their parents' basement who's online all day. Like they seemingly have full-time jobs or whatever, and things that could keep them busy and enough money that they could do more or less what they want, and yet they still are drawn to the social media and feel like they just need to get their views out there instead of just.
Extremely online politics, no less. I mean,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like they could just be quiet and cash the checks, and they would be fine. But they don't do that, so it is sort of like a compulsion or an addiction.
yeah, no, I think that's totally right. But yeah, I do, I don't know how we have this kind of cultural reckoning, because I still think drag culture, going back to the endorphins thing, it's sort of taking the endorphins rush thing that we get from posting and getting retweets and likes. Drag culture is that on overdrive. I think that's why people enjoy tearing down Gina Carano, or Near Tandon, or whoever it is. Like there's an endorphin rush of
Hmm.
being like, yes, I was part of the finger wagging here
Yeah,
too. And I think until people get past that, we're still going to have this weird asymmetry in how we treat tweets. And sometimes tweets mean a lot, and sometimes tweets don't mean anything at all.
yeah, and they should mean almost nothing at all. But the fact that Donald J. Trump, rode them to the White House and then used it as his primary communication platform, even though he had like a paid staff of press secretaries and so forth,
Well,
that
and
could
he
issue
made them have
statements
a
on his
weight.
behalf.
Like when he was calling for the firing of Jamel Hill, that was serious, and ESPN actually like changed the way they operated in their business relationship with Jamel Hill as a result of Donald Trump's tweets. So, like, yeah, no, I mean, you're right. They shouldn't have that weight, but they also do now.
Yeah. So I think well, hopefully, like I said, the fact that like we can be 99% sure that Joe Biden is not writing his own tweets. It's a like the head of social media at the White House is writing Joe Biden's tweets, because maybe he doesn't even know how to tweet. He's a 77-year-old man, and so that's a better system that
Is he
than
only 77? I thought he's like 78 or 79.
he might be 78 at this point, but
Yeah.
he's up there. So
Yeah.
he who knows if he even knows how to use a computer. I'm sure Trump doesn't know how to use a computer. But yeah, that sort of thing that the Biden account is just tweeting out innocuous press statement-y, we're going to beat the coronavirus, if, like, we need unity sort of stuff. Like that's how things should be. And Trump was an aberration, and hopefully the return to normalcy that is part of the Biden administration will return Twitter to being this weird niche site for weirdos to fight with each other. And
And yell at journalists. Like, I feel like that's the other good part about your Twitter. All right, I think that's a good show, good place to stop it. I'll talk a little bit on the next show here, guys, about the stuff that's going on with Biden and his kids. Hunter Biden's not going anywhere. My former lover. No one wants to write about the Hunter Biden Chris Novembrino sex tape. New York Post, I'm looking at you. You guys wussed out, cowards. After the election goes away, Aryeh, they stopped caring. It's cold. It's
did
cold.
it get erased from the laptop or
And no, it has not been. It's been reviewed on the laptop, baby. Good times. All right, where can people find you on the internet?
yeah, so like I said, Culturally Determined podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And I am on Twitter, like I said, like Gina Carano. I just can't stop posting it. So that's ARYHCW. I don't post as much about the Holocaust.
I was just saying that quote really hits differently when you do it.
Yeah, there's very little talk of Nazis and atrocities during World War II and so forth. It's mostly just stupid jokes. But yeah, you can find me ARYHCW on Twitter.
As for me, this show is at DWATG on Twitter. If you want to see the video version of this episode and all episodes, go to patreon.com/DWATG. Quick announcement here. The All in the Family podcast, the prestigious All in the Family podcast, has been sunsetted. I discontinued the website here. All of the episodes are still available on demand if you sub up on Patreon. If for some reason you want to go on a binge of All in the Family podcast and listen along to 54 episodes as you watch the series. Like if you decide you want to check out the series, it's a great show.
I was on one of those episodes.
He was,
Like
yeah,
episode
yeah.
6 or 7, I think.
Yeah, you were on. No, we had a number of great people. So I want to thank everyone who's involved with the show. I mean, in a weird way, especially like with inflation on the horizon and stuff, I actually still think that there's some tread on the tires for All in the Family. So we might, maybe from time to time review an episode or something. I might go through and see if there's something super topical for the premium side. But
Well, certainly Trump was the closest to Archie Bunker as any political figure has been in our lifetimes. So maybe we could view like what did like Archie opened like a diner or a coffee shop or something?
oh, Archie Bunker's place.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, that'd be interesting. Archie Bunker's network. Yeah.
But he kind of softened over time, right?
Yeah, that was the other mistake. Is well, they decided to warm him like that was actually one of the interesting twists with Archie. Is like so obviously they're writing him to be hateable, but there were a lot of people in the country because the liberal writers in Hollywood didn't realize how many conservatives there were out there. There were a lot of conservatives who were like, he's kind of speaking my language. Kind of like all this stuff that he says about what's the deal with all these blacks and Latinos. And so, like, they did eventually try to find a balance between keeping Archie who Archie was, but also making him more sympathetic, which I think they actually did a good job with. And resulted in him. I think it's what makes him such an iconic character is that he is this multi-dimensional guy who is capable of love and also hate. Often in the same episode, often within the same scene. And in this sense, he's a very, very complicated and deep figure. But to your point, by the 80s, like we had run so many variations of this show. Also, I don't think Archie works without Edith. It's the dynamic between Archie and Edith and their interplay, and how she tempers him in various ways, is super essential. And when you pull that out, then you just have.
What was it that they just wrote her off the show, or the actress died, or
no? Gene Stapleton wanted to be written off the show. She didn't die. Yeah, she just didn't.
Maybe one of Trump's many problems is that he didn't have an Edith. He just had Melania.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps one of the strongest dichotomies between the two is that like Archie loves Edith like in this pure, deep, like generationally identifiable as love sort of thing, where it's not about like looks, and it's not about. I mean, it's not even about her being the smartest. What like he just loves Edith. I mean, it's post rational. Whereas Trump does not love his
Trump
wives.
only loves himself,
and the only thing he likes about his wives is that they're hot. So it's all the cosmetic stuff that like Archie at the core simply doesn't care about. Like he doesn't care if Edith wears the best clothing. Like I mean, that's just not an Archie thing. But Trump does.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Archie would learn a lesson at the end of every episode, and maybe the next episode he wouldn't be like that lesson would have faded away because every episode was independent. But like Trump never learned a lesson in his life really, and so he just kept up his bad behavior, which resulted in mob storming the Capitol to get back to where we
and even to your point, All the Family is a little more linear. That it's not purely episodic. There are actually running narrative points that continue in advance. So even in this sense, Archie's more advanced than Donald Trump, who seems to be living the same day in the same episode over and over and over again. Yeah. But anyways, if you ever want to check out All in the Family podcast, I'm very proud of the work. I'm proud of Lindsay. Lindsay's still part of the DWATG family, of course. And I think she did great work on the show. I'm really glad that she was the co-host. But check that out by messaging me, or you can find all of those episodes on the Patreon, patreon.com/DWATG. And other than that, that's it. That's all I got for the show here. So thank you, Aryeh. Thank you all so much for listening. Until the next one, bye-bye.
Thanks.